to the Reflections on the State of the Indo-Caribbean Diaspora, FIIDS, Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, to introduce the event. Mr. Kanderalji is also associated with GITPRO, Global Indian Technology Professionals Association, as well as Seva International, a humanitarian organization in global disaster relief. Mr. Kanderalji.
Thank you. Vinay is president of Hindu Yuva. Welcome all of you. Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, we started 5 years back, mostly active center in various parts of United States, but in Washington DC. So we host dialogues between the experts on India and experts from India. That's the one aspect. To reflect on the contemporary geopolitical and social issues of the both related to policy matters and international issues. So that is related to one, that is the India, and then related to Indian diaspora. So these are the two focuses of FIIDS. And year long we host different events related to these topics. Like we had Indo-Israel relations. We earlier had a program on a report on a flight of Yazidis, and just last month we had a program in Silicon Valley on Indo-Fijian diaspora. So we had last year, a couple of years back, a survey of Indo-American youths born and brought up over here. So what are their perception about identity? What do they consider their connectivity with India or the culture? What are their marriage preferences and different issues that typically we don't directly deal with. So we had a very professionally done survey. Similarly, when the election happened last year, we had a survey of Indo-Americans to get their kind of a pulse of and what are the views and the issues. This particular conference is very important because when FIIDS is working on the diaspora, Indo-Caribbean diaspora, or even what we can say the broader Girmitias, is a story of a very inspiring story of resiliency. What we can see that how they initially landed, cut off from the mainland, but still continue that cultural connectivity, established themselves in host countries, contributed back and became one of the influential community in the host countries, and now it has a global play. There is a second migration happened in you can think that other parts, particularly Caribbean diaspora mainly coming into New York, then Fijian diaspora coming to the west of America, like Silicon Valley, California. African is the Indian diaspora from Africa mostly went to UK, London, Europe. So that's that we see this is kind of second migration. So this is a time to look at where we are as a diaspora 100 years after the ending of or abolishment of indentureship. Taking a stock at the situation right now, the trends are there, and how do we move forward? This story is not just the reflection is not just the reflection for Indo-Caribbean diaspora, but it is actually going to be a story to pay attention to the entire Indian diaspora. And that's why it is a very important to come and look at it from various perspectives, from the experts to community leaders. So that is the purpose of this conference. And we put together this one very in a short time. So a lot of like Ravidev ji and Vishnu ji and others, Somdar ji helped to put a good panel, and welcome for that. Vinay.
Thank you, Dhanyavad Kanderalji, for that wonderful introduction on FIIDS. I would like to call Dr. Rakesh Sinha to Rakesh Sridharji to speak. He is the founder of the Indo-American Friendship Group, and thank you very much.
And he's also Sangachalak and active in various organizations and appears. So please welcome to inaugurate. We are requesting him to inaugurate the conference.
It's my honor to inaugurate the conference.
So, as per our tradition, we usually light up diyas, but since it's a fire hazard, we request you to light the diyas in your hearts and minds. So, with that, I would like to call upon the first panel. The session 1 is on the historical perspectives of migration, resistance, settlement, adaptation, and the future. And the first speaker is Dr. Lomaraj Roopnarayan, Professor, Jackson University, who's going to speak on the misconceptions of indenture. And the second speaker is Ms. Karen Deepnarayan Swaroop, Mass Communications Professional and co-founder of the Green Brain Initiative, who's going to speak on resilience of our ancestors and the potential of our diaspora. I invite the two speakers to please occupy the chairs of the dais. And I'd like to invite Professor Roopnarayan to address the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, to be here. It is my pleasure to be here as well. I will speak on the topic I think that has been poorly addressed, and that is the misconceptions of indention. But before I get into my topic, let me say that I truly believe that Indians in the Indo-Caribbean, especially in Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname, have done remarkably well, given the fact that they arrived in that region basically empty-handed. If you look in business, they've done well. If you look in education, they have done well. In the other areas of life, they have done well. And I think if I have to describe an experience in one word, I would say that the Indian survival in the Caribbean is incomplete. Let me repeat that. It's incomplete. And because it is incomplete, there's this resilience, the word used just now, connectivity, the ongoing struggle to reconstruct, to revive, to adapt, to move on, despite problems and progress, despite challenges and contributions, despite determination and detriment. So, we are at a crossroads in many respects. And if I have to predict what will happen in the future with Indian culture, I think that pattern I just mentioned will continue, because we are incomplete people. Incomplete in the sense because we are transplanted people, where we are. And because of that excuse, we will continue to do the things we're doing now. But in private conversations, I think there are a lot of things need to be done with the study of indention in regards to misconceptions. And I use the word misconceptions sensitively. I could use the word, I prefer ignorance. I'm not to point finger at anyone, but ignorance. I'll remain sensitive but use the word misconceptions for this talk. The first misconception is statistics. I do not know who come up with this idea that 500,000 Indians were brought to the Caribbean. I don't know where that figure came from. And I look hard and I research. I can go back to original base. And you may ask, why is statistics important? Well, it's important for a number of reasons. If you look at it in a contemporary standpoint, policy making, marketing, distribution of resources, and so on. So the misconception of indenture is that the statistics I don't think is valid. For example, the first shipload of Indians who were brought to Guyana was given, what figure was given in 396 and 406. In various regions in the Caribbean, various numbers are given. And so we are not sure how many Indians were brought to the Indo-Caribbean or the Caribbean as a whole. And so I think we need to go back and examine those statistics so we have an accurate perception of our history. Okay? And one way to do that, and this is something very radical, is to go back and look at the unclaimed remittances that went unclaimed. And I think if we go back and get some of this money, we can fund a PhD student or students to do some population studies to bring this information to accuracy. I can go on that. The second misconception is that Indian people are fundamentally non-migratory, that they are very rural-based people, and that they do not migrate that much. And if you look at the literature, there isn't a comprehensive text on the migration of Indian people in the Caribbean. There's migration from India to the Caribbean, and articles here and there from the Caribbean to the diaspora. Okay? And so that's another area that needs to be addressed. I think it made logical sense that Indians would have taken or took a long journey from India to the Caribbean that will continue that pattern. Okay? And I took it upon myself, and I have been writing on this migration experience. And I found that Indians have been very active to a point that they're all over the world, not only from the Caribbean to North America, the developed world. So that's another area that's highly, I think, it's misunderstood because of a lack of literature. And so more work needs to be done in that area to bring this migration experience up to par with other ethnic groups in the Caribbean. You may want to ask, say, well, why is migration important? Well, migration is important for a host of reasons. It shows that people can grab opportunities or become aware of opportunities, which speaks to their capacity to move beyond their own base, to participate in other cultures, or become in contact with other people, as opposed to being stationary and perhaps myopic. The perception of Indians in the Caribbean, especially where I grew up, they are rural-based, rural-bound. Nothing wrong with that. Rural life can be very rich, fulfilling, very enriching. But to just anchor them into one particular area for over 150 years, is that a good thing? So then my call is that this issue needs to be addressed in terms of misconception. Because if it's less addressed, you have more misconceptions of people who have been very migratory. Okay? That's the second misconception. The third, and I've written about this in the Guyana Times, was a columnist there for 2 years, on issue of land. There is this understanding in the Caribbean among other ethnic groups that Indians got off the boat and received land. That's totally absurd. Less than 1% receive land. And they receive those land merely because they exchange or return passages. And so you have leaders in the Caribbean, in Guyana in particular, right now, who have heard that Indians receive land. out of the 239,000 or 240,000 that came to Guyana, less than 1% received land. And for somehow, this thought is peddled in Guyana, the Indians, the land they have today, is because they were given during the British indenture. That is a total misconception. It's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. And I don't want to go through the statistics here, but I've done some work and I laid out the statistics. I went back to the archive, look where lands and how many lands were given, and the records did speak. But for somehow, it remains a secret. It remains a secret. We need to speak out more on this. And I hate to say this, I'm the only one actually who's taking up this battle. I mean, others have, but taking it very seriously. And that's one area. Another one, I call for the return of unclaimed remittances, which is like today millions of dollars that Indians deposited during the indenture period. And they never got those money back, either because their family died in India, so the hair is going to be traced, or they simply died, and so the money went back to the colonial bank. Now, I think we have a case in court at the highest level to try to at least look and see where that money is, so that we can use that money to address some of the inadequacies that are so associated with the experience of Indians on intention. There are lots more misconceptions, but I'll stick with these three. As my message here is that we need to go back and look at some of these problems during indenture and try to correct them, and so that we can have a sort of accurate picture of who we are. And where the statistics are concerned, that has been repeated often and often and often. I did it myself. And I come to a point where we have to go back and make sure that what we are citing is accurate, so the future generation will have an accurate picture of what transpired during indenture. And I shall stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rupnarayan, for throwing light on the misconceptions, which is extremely important. I would now like to invite Ms. Deepnarayan to speak on resilience of our ancestors and potential of our diaspora. Ms. Deepnarayan.
Thank you. Respected elders, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, namaskar. I am honored to speak at this conference today as a deeply grateful great-granddaughter of Indian immigrants to Trinidad and Tobago. My objective today is to share my thoughts on the resilience of our ancestors, as well as to offer some nascent findings from my research that will hopefully initiate a dialogue around the issues of migration and significant mutual benefits to India and her diaspora. Scholars have pointed out that Indian indenture historiography has come of age in its own right as a specialized field of study, not as an appendage of British imperial or Indian colonial history. As more and more research is conducted and theses are written by historians and anthropologists on Indian indentureship, we are beginning to understand the full extent and enormity of this experience. There are far-reaching insights that are enabling us to better inspect and analyze the enormity of what was entailed in the life of these immigrants, spanning almost 8 decades of bonded servitude in the Caribbean. What is emerging is a more profound understanding of multi-layered components that are informing premises like resistance, accommodation, and resilience, among others. When we listen to and read the individual and collective stories that have been gathered, we understand that our ancestors were not weak and docile as they've been portrayed too many times. The deplorable social and economic conditions in an India dominated by the East India Company and later the British Raj forced many to enlist as indentured workers. Increased rent, tenant indebtedness, evictions, lower wages, increased taxes, forced unpaid labor were all exploitative practices that resulted in widespread poverty. When the resistance by the Indians to colonial rule happened, those who were involved in the riots were sentenced to imprisonment and hangings. So the Indians who migrated were not simply adventurers. They were seeking a better life for themselves and their families. They separated from their families, their villages, and braved the treacherous Kala Pani, which claimed the lives of many during the journeys on the sea that lasted for some 100 days. They endured wretched slave-like conditions of disease, deprivation, and death on these journeys to reach the new land. The history of the Indians in the Caribbean is one of individual, family, and community resilience, and the examples are innumerable. Siva Sadhu, the legendary icon who single-handedly built the temple in the sea by transporting materials bucket by bucket on the handlebars of his bicycle for 17 years, is a testament of this. The defenseless men, women, and children who were killed and maimed by police gunfire in the Jose Massacre of 1884 in South Trinidad bear testament to the resilience of our ancestors. In many instances, individual strength was tied in with community strength. Storytelling was a medium for comfort and for staying connected to their memories of India. Those who traversed both worlds, or those who traversed two worlds, and preserved the language, culture, and spiritual practices despite adversities in an environment that was hostile, oppressive, and exploitative, sometimes by simply gathering under a village tree and singing verses from the Ramayana, are evidence of their resilience. The resilience strategies being gleaned from the narratives should be used as a strong foundation for the present and future generations to instill a deeper sense of pride in our rich heritage and the sacrifice and perseverance of our ancestors. The stories about the disturbing times and events that our ancestors went through, scarce resources, sickness, death, soul loneliness from lack of a family support system, exploitation, discrimination, oppression, and injustice are indicators of historical trauma. Historical trauma that has been transmitted across generations and may exist today as unresolved intergenerational distress is an area that needs research in the study of the Indian indentureship experience. Despite the hardships, the indentured Indians reshaped the landscape of each country they were planted in. They were the architects of a resurgent economy and built a strong, secure foundation for future generations. Today, their descendants have continued to build on this legacy and are leaders in every professional field. Indians in the Caribbean are part of the largest diaspora in the world. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, from the time our forefathers arrived, they began to plant roots in this new nation. A large number did not maintain familial bonds with their relatives back in India, so this connection was not maintained. And as each generation followed, these roots and life in the new nation strengthened. Today, the Indian heritage and practices are alive and strong and are continually evolving in creative and novel ways there. But many of the second, third, and fourth generations of Indians do not feel a strong personal connection with India, apart from the deep respect and gratitude for the spiritual and cultural practices that were passed on to them. From my conversations and a brief survey of some of my Indian community in Trinidad, for the most part, Many do not feel a sense of home and belonging with India. Those who feel a strong bond with India are those who have had a direct experience with India. For example, those who have traveled to India, studied, worked, and lived in India. They're not fully aware of the political, economic, and social challenges that face India because the news about India are not generally featured in mainstream reporting unless there is a major natural disaster in India. If they want to learn about contemporary India, they must actively seek it out themselves via social media and other sources on the internet. The interest isn't strong enough to seek out this information regularly as they continue to focus on their own personal and national challenges. They want India to advance, and they feel a sense of pride when it succeeds. There is a willingness to contribute to the development of India through business investment, exchange of knowledge and skills, mentoring, volunteerism, eco and cultural tourism, collaborating and working to empower women, and on health and environmental issues, bringing education, technology, and adequate healthcare to villages, contributing their voices and stories toward the strengthening of the diaspora, if it is mutually beneficial to them and their home nation as well. They would like to be recognized as children of the Indian diaspora and be welcomed as such by India through tangible efforts. They would welcome a stronger relationship with India through more education scholarships, subsidized travel opportunities to experience and interact with the real India and local businesses and NGOs in India to explore cross-cultural, cross-marketing opportunities, cultural and student exchange programs, local cultural centers to teach language and performance and creative arts, membership in a recognized body of advisors for diaspora leaders and influencers, opportunities for next generation engagement like mentoring in industries, and a genealogy database, an online resource which allows people of the Indian diaspora to trace their history and their impact on the places in which they have settled. So there is certainly an opportunity for developing mutually stronger relationships with this part of the diaspora if an open, trusting, transparent, warm, hospitable, internal and external environment is established that is conducive to relationship building. As we reflect on resilience and potential today and remain cognizant of the diverse challenges still before us in our respective nations, I would like to share a verse from Indo-Trinidadian poet, the late Dr. Kenneth Parmasad. But thus shall it one day be said that our resilience had in triumph reigned, and also shall it come to pass that in the full ripeness of time's own season, we shall break out of these cold confines, and commanding the turn of time itself, we shall spread our roots and branches out to the furthest corners of the land. May we keep connecting emotionally and spiritually with the indomitable spirit of our ancestors and carry their guidance and inspiration as we move forward. Thank you. Namaskar.
Dhanyavad, Kiranji, Narayan, for that wonderful speech which had a lot of solutions to the issues faced. Now I would like to call Mr. Robert Mahesh onto the podium. He is a second generation migrant who's going to speak about his experiences. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters, Namaskar, good day. Good afternoon. I stand before you today as the only living son of an immigrant father who went from India to Guyana in 1909 on the SS Sutlej. I am his only 81-year-old son who saw how the immigrants at Plantation de Kindred on the west coast of Demerara, Guyana, lived and worked and survived. I had 16 years of an eyewitness account simply by observing. Never had the opportunity to go to high school because my parents could not have afforded that. But I entered the teaching profession, taught for 25 years, and rose from a pupil teacher to that of deputy headmaster. I graduated from the Teachers Training College in 1961-62, and fourth batch history graduate from the University of Guyana without a high school education. That has put me in good stead to look a little bit more closely at our story as it continues to unfold. And my special connection today, and may I ask, is there by chance any particular individual here who is really a son or a daughter of an immigrant father or mother from India? Right now here? 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 Am I? One? Okay, so we're not.
Let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Bishop Ramsey, and my dad almost had the same connection. So he went back to India. My dad is 96 years old. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring him over here.
I suspect that we are in a small group.
Yes, we're small. See, I
But-
had the same experience just like.
But my father was illiterate.
Yeah.
He was 19 years old, and I got 4 publications to my credit, writing from my experiences of dislocation and survival. In New York, I became an immigrant in 1970 with a wife and 3 children. And at St. John's University, I got an MA History at the age of 70. My history thesis is titled Contemporary World, a short history of the Guyanese East Indian community of Richmond Hill, Queens, New York, a case of dislocation and survival. I am presently getting that type to be published. So those of us from Guyana and around the Caribbean, even here, will be able to see what has happened to us in Guyana and how come we are here and why we are here. I want to say that if we do not document our story, if we don't document our story, nobody will do that for us. We have experiences, all of these here, each one of us is a story. And the people who are to do that documentation is us, we. Our forefathers were illiterate. Let us not blame any other person or others. Our children are now graduating from universities with BAs and MAs and PhDs. They're getting the skills and the necessary skills and knowledge to do that documentation. Let us do it before it is too late. I pay humble reverence to my father by writing a poem in my first poetry book in Hindi. If you speak Hindi, I'll understand, but I can't speak it as fluently. But my first Hindi poem with the title, Papa, abhi tak main tujhe bhul na saka. Father, until now, I cannot forget you. He died in 1956. Although he did not know to read and write, in my true to life story, a pilgrimage to the place of his birth in Guyana, I said, today you have people who are doctors, lawyers, prime ministers, president, can't touch my father's foot because of the quality of life that he led. Not what is happening today. Brothers and sisters, we have got to take charge and write our story, and with that education, let us free ourselves, and by writing, documenting, and sharing, some of the injustices will cease. One verse from my father, from that Hindi poem. Hey, प्यारा पापा कहाँ है तू? अभी तक मैं तुझे भूल न सका, जब तुम्हारा बेटा हीरा राजू हर इतवार मंदिर में तू ले गया. My dear loving father, I cannot forget you. When every Sunday you took me to the temple and took me to the temple to worship and to understand a little of our situation. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters.
Dhanyawad, Robert G. That was indeed very inspiring, and all of us can take a lot of inspiration from that and implement it in our own lives. Now, I would like to start the Q&A session. So, I'll be coming around with a microphone, and whoever has questions can.
Before everybody warm up, because typically people take longer time to question,
Sure.
and take longer time to ask a question. So I will be short in asking questions. So 2 questions for both of you. One is that it's very important to capture the statistics and others. But are there any studies to trace the roots? That is that like which village this particular family or this particular diaspora group came from? And are there any efforts to connect those people to those villages? That is question to you. And to basically Karen is another question. That is kind of an inspiring story of the resiliency of retention of the culture. Right? We have seen even in Silicon Valley, we see that Fijian diaspora has retained the culture in a way that language, it might not be as pure as kind of Sanskritized language, but it's very creditable that the Hindi language has been preserved to a degree, and also the culture with bhajans and all of that thing. But question is that now, when my second migration, what is the scenario? Are we going to see the same resiliency, or we are actually not seeing this? So these are the 2 questions for battery down probably other.
Hello, check.
That's on. Okay. One of the things that I think I would like to point out is that in Trinidad right now, in fact, not right now, but for the last couple of decades, the culture has been evolving in very novel ways. One of the things I would like to draw attention to, with regard to retaining our language or even like bits of it, is the Pichakari competition. This was started by the Hindu Prachar Kendra by Sri Raviji, who is one of our foremost Hindu leaders there. And what they have been doing is inviting members of the public to create songs, but within those songs there are lines or words in Bhojpuri, in Hindi, in Sanskrit at points in time that are used also. there are Sanskrit classes that are happening there. So the preservation of our languages, efforts are definitely being made to try to preserve that. There are Hindi classes, there are Sanskrit classes, and they are very creative and novel ways that the culture has been developing over time. I hope this answers the question on the resiliency. Because regardless of the challenges that we face, the mandirs, the centers that are basically having like these education programs that continue to sort of propel our culture forward.
Just to piggyback a little bit what she's saying, in Guyana in particular, I think ethnopolitics have driven ethnic groups, and in this case Indians, to preserve their Indianness, if you will, Indian identity. I know in the village I grew up in, there's a revival of Tall when I was growing up. It was dying again because of politics and immigration and so on. I think that, as I said, the Indian culture in the Caribbean is incomplete, and because of that, it will continue to evolve or evolve. To what direction, I'm not sure, but certainly that dynamics will play out. Your first question to me, the one concerning statistics, I think what you're asking is the approach, how to address this problem. I see it's a problem. And there are individual or group connections back to India, but I'm not sure if those pieces can be put together. There's a challenge there. But certainly, my position is the statistics are inconclusive. It poses a lot of challenge in understanding the history, the basis of it. And the problem is that people, the writers, tend to repeat the same figures over and over. And my question is, where did this figure come from? And I worked very hard to figure out where this figure. I can't go back to the base. And unfortunately, they have written quite a bit on intention. I've used some figures. People are citing my work. You know, it's challenging. Here.
No, I was thinking that.
This young man has a question.
I have a question here. Well, there's something that I want to say in terms of what Ruth and Ryan spoke about. How we've actually made progress in terms of education and business and so on. Yeah. I personally don't believe we've made much progress from the days of actually apprenticeship to now. The mindset is still the same. The same rural, semi-feudal community mindset is still present. We have made, some of us have made progress in education and business, but the majority really have not moved from being a rural community. For example, look, in Guyana, it's only about 30% of the Indians from the rural community, from rural environment, can actually read and write. This can be seen in those that come to Queens. In business, it's only about 2% of the population of Indians have actually made progress. The rest are 4%. Now, look, if we talk about education again, Trinidad in 1940s, the literacy rate among the East Indians was maybe about 1 or 2%. In the 90s, it was 95%. The literacy rate among East Indians in Guyana today is only 30 to 40%. This is not actually documented because the government's actually saying our literacy rate is 99%. It's not true. You go and take some samples in the rural area, you find this is quite true what I'm saying. The next thing, you have not made progress because every government in Trinidad and Guyana, any Indian government, they did not last a very long time because the other people the other races see them as what we term coolie from Trinidad. I'm saying that, tell us where they've made this progress.
It seems to me that you're holding a position which I don't want to dispute. You declare a statement, declare a position. I'm not here to change that. What I'm trying to tell you is that I'm just going back in Guyana. I think to paint a picture that Indians are not progressive from the time of indenture is a sweeping statement. There are, and the mere fact that some have done, if you use your reasoning, the mere fact that some have done well, by reasoning, there is something called relational sort of development. So my brother became a PhD, somebody else in the village became a PhD. If you have a few of them, it's sort as role models. And not only that, in the age of globalization, every home in Guyana have access to the internet. If we use the internet as a sign of progress, connection to the world, highway of information, they're not as ignorant as they might have been. In fact, what I found, they are very much sophisticated going back to my days of India. They know so much of India just because they live in the age of globalization. But I'm not here to dispute your point. Guyana, Indians are poor, Indians are uneducated. A number of problems there. Suicide rate is very high. A lot of people are rural-based, doesn't mean they're rural-based. They're
sabotaged in government.
I request the audience to keep the discussion for one of the breaks. Please keep your questions concise and succinct. Thank you.
I was going to follow up with a question, or a first question, which was tracing the routes. Are there like records of the ships coming from India to Guyana, and could you just, if one spent the time to count the number of ships and the population of ships, could you come up with is it possible to come up with a population just from that?
Yeah, the problem starts really in India, maybe the record in India, how many came and so forth. And the people who recorded this information, I'm not saying what's your first part? Yes, there are records in Guyana archives in the Caribbean, records to examine. But my question, my concern is that the Kalula system, you have to examine it with a very curious eye. Because the people who recorded these statistics, we know now, they had an agenda. They had an agenda. So even though we go back and find those statistics, then we face another round of challenge. Do we go ahead and say, okay, these are the numbers? Because we know a lot of bad things happen in the Kalula system. But where the archives are concerned, if we can go back, we have to go with certain figures. You just can't dismiss it all. And I think if you have a couple of PhD students who get involved in this, through funding and so forth, I think that area needs to be addressed. And another area, the costs and all that. My experience that there needs more work to be done in that area. I don't want to hog the time.
I would just like to answer to make a point to the first person who asked about the politics. Politics is just one part of who we are as Indians in the Caribbean. Yes, there are many challenges. Those of you who know what's happening in my home nation of Trinidad and Tobago, there are many challenges we are being faced there. But in spite of that, the culture is very strong. We are flourishing as a people in spite of it. So I think we have to look at politics as one element, but it doesn't define us as a people.
Final question.
How does the massacre in Trinidad, I think you mentioned the massacre in Trinidad in 1884, compare with the massacre, Wismar massacre of Guyana? Do you have any information on that?
I'm sorry.
Which one could be considered to be worse as far as the suffering of the Indians were concerned?
I'm sorry, I don't have the information on what happened in Guyana, but what I can tell you is I think 20 people were killed by gunfire in Trinidad and over 100 were maimed. But I don't have the statistics on what happened in Guyana, I'm sorry.
Were those people who killed those Indians, were they Afro?
Sorry, you don't counter questions, sir. You can discuss in the... Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Deepanarayan, and thank you, Professor Rupnarayan, and thanks to the audience for all the questions. I would like to call Mr. Sunil Kale and Mr. Rakesh, Dr. Rakesh Sridhar to please give a plaque to these speakers. One moment. I'd like, because the audience, to give a round of applause to speakers and I request Mr. Suraj Basit to have the mic for the next session. Thank you.
Namaskar, everyone. And again, thank you for coming to this event today. So we'll start our next wave of talks. So the broad topic is the contributions of Indians to host their countries, India, and the world. So I request our speakers. So the first speaker is Dr. Somdat Manabir. He's a epidemiologist at the National Institute of Health. And his topic is the emergence of scientists and scientific thoughts in the Indo-Caribbean community.
Can you turn on the volume? Can't hear you.
I think it's better now.
Let me say, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'd like to begin by saying, Mama Vacha, Namaskara, Dhanyavada Samarpayami. What I just said, I express my thanks to all of you for hosting this event here today. Let me take a moment before I get into this topic to say how grateful I am personally to Hindu Yuva. This is the Hindu Yuva of Columbia University in particular. Hindu Yuva is the future of Hindu Dharma as far as I'm concerned. We need educated people. They're doing a fantastic job. And thank you all very much for that. The next thing, I'm delighted to be here to see so many of my Swayam Sevak brothers and sisters too, Sevika. I've been involved with this Sangh, as you know, for a very long time. I'm probably one of the first person in the New York area that got connected with Sangh since the early 1990s. And I remember my first meeting with Kandarauji. I don't know if you would remember, but we met in the mountains of California, in the hills of Pomona. This is when I had my experience with the first Sangha Siksha Varga. And listening to the discussion just now, I wanted to just forget all of this thing that I wanted to tell you and to talk about my personal experiences with my colleagues from India and my own experience when I went there and the excellent treatment that I was given when I was there and so forth, but maybe that will come up in the discussion. So I will save some time for that. Now, why I'm talking about this topic, by training I have some bias. I'm a scientist by training, and I feel that there has been many conferences on the diaspora previously. This is not incorrect. Most of these conferences deal with politics. I have not heard, to the best of my knowledge, any one of these things addressing the contributions of scientists. And I'm happy to say that sons and daughters of Girmitians are great scientists and made sterling contribution to, I would say, human civilization. I will show you 2 examples in a moment. So I feel that this is a gap, and we need to address this gap. And I was a little bit forceful in making sure that from now on, when we talk about diaspora, we must talk and think in a scientific frame of mind. So that is the kind of perspective I come from. The other thing I want to talk about, I do not like the word Indo-Caribbean. That's my personal preference. You will hear Ravi Dev Ji, who is here, will speak, and he will put very good perspective on these things as well. I don't like the word Indo because we are not a subspecies. We are Indians, and if you look at in terms of linguistic, Bharatiyas mean Indians, to the best of translations. Nothing can translate to Indo. So my preference, I've changed it, I made it Indian Caribbean. Okay? So I just want to talk that what I'm going to be talking about here is my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with the places that employ me. And this is a kind of thing that I need to say. So this is what I would like to say. So this is my outline. In Sanskrit, we say this is a rekha. What am I going to talk about? I'll give a brief introduction. Maybe I talked about it already. I want to try to push home this idea of scientific reasoning. This is something that is very important if our community, Indian community that is going to survive, as I say, then you'll get a sense of what I'm thinking about. I'm going to show you a page from my grandfather's ledger. And I think that this will convince you that even in 1905, they were thinking in a scientific way. They were very interested in data documentation. This is a gift that I received. It's a gift that you cannot put a price to, that I got from my grandfather that I still have, that many of the family members would like to pay me for. I said, I cannot give it. Okay? Then I want to give a little bit of a brief experience in terms of my first experience with a real experiment from an unlettered person, who again was my grandfather, his scientific thinking. Then I want to give you the example of 2 outstanding Guyanese scientists. There are many, but I'm familiar with these 2 people very closely. When we talk about the Indian diaspora, we need to be talking and thinking carefully about population data. There are population dynamics that have been changing and will change and will affect who we are as a people. And I wanted to emphasize that a little bit here today as well. That will give us a little bit of a thinking how we should see ourselves in terms of our future. Okay, Upanayana. This is a kind of a little bit of introduction. I've said previously that there's a gap in terms of how we see ourselves. Maybe scientists are very shy people. I don't know. Or maybe it is not in our scheme of thinking when we talk about diaspora, so we need to think about that. But I just wanted to make an argument that I believe that the DNA of the Indian Caribbean diaspora, and I may say something about Indian Caribbean. Guyana is not technically a Caribbean country. Guyana is in South America. I'm only saying this clarification because our friends may not be aware of this. It is mainland South America facing the Caribbean Sea. But the headquarters of Caribbean countries, CARICOM, is there. And therefore, it's okay. We are Caribbean as well. Okay? So, I think that the DNA of Indian Caribbean people is coded for science. What do I mean by that? All of us, we hear some examples already, how proud we are of our glorious traditions, like Sanskrit. Many Caribbean people swear by Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads. These texts are all scientific in nature. So it is there. We know whether we come from Trinidad or Guyana or Suriname, and I wanted to divert a little bit. If Surinamese were in the audience today, they probably would not understand anything we're saying. Why? Because they know very little English. They speak as though they are still from India. They speak Bihari, Bhojpuri. When they go to India, they fit right in. Their English language is very little. Only 2 weeks ago, we had experiences with Surinamese families. Very little, but it's really a wonderful thing. So in our context again, think about it, how we have evolved. From the slave barracks to lodges. What are lodges? Lodges are row houses. After row houses, where there are multiple families, they start to build wooden houses. After wooden houses, they start to build mahals. If you go to Guyana today, in the county that I'm from, you will see beautiful houses, concrete structures and things like that. Could match any building in the great United States, or Bharat as well. And we have made, as I've said, great advances in the sciences. I want to make another point that I believe that the professional, I'm using this word, professional political class do not seem to understand the utility of science and scientific data. Because I am not seeing these people using data to advance the interests of the Indian community. They speak from the top of their heads. And I want to make the point that we need to be thinking like this. Scientific methodology is going to be very, very important if we are going to advance the rights and the dignities of our people, whether they are from any one of these places, Guyana, Trinidad, Suriname, and other places outside of the Caribbean as well. We have to be thinking like this. And you don't need lots of people to do that. You need a few good people to do this. And it can be done, it is happening. So a little bit about scientific reasoning. I don't want to pick on anybody. I just want to give an example. This is a scenario. I just made it up, okay? At this conference here, we have all the speakers with Hindu-sounding names. Suppose someone make a suggestion that we must include, say, Christian and Muslim speakers, because the Indian diaspora has a sizable Christian and Muslim population. It's a benign statement. But if you apply a little bit of reasoning to that, you will see in scientific terminology, there's some assumptions here. And these assumptions may not necessarily be correct. I say this because I feel, based on my experiences in Guyana, whenever we talk about these things, we are kind of not concerned about ourselves so much. We are always concerned about somebody else. And I think in the Indian community, this is also the problem. We need to think a bit outwards. So I've created some situation here that, look, if we say Christian, what we're thinking about, we're bringing a religious input into the discussion. Because Indian is not religion. Indian is secular. If you say Muslim, it's the same thing. So we're making an assumption. We cannot make this assumption. Anyone, whatever the name is, I suppose, is speaking here at any conference based on expertise, not the religious affiliation. Another assumption is a person with a Hindu name equals being a Hindu. And we know that is also not true. So we have to be careful. Diversity is very important. But when we talk about something like this in an Indian diaspora conference, the diversity is not a religious diversity that we should be concerned about, because it's a secular thing. We should be talking about diversity based on gender. Maybe we have too many men speaking. We should have more women speaking. That will be an appropriate type of diversity. So I just wanted to set the ball rolling in terms of our thinking, scientific thinking. So this is my grandfather's ledger that he gave me, and this is a page that I scanned. This is a very important historical document. What you're seeing here is how the village that I grew up, number 57 village in the Quarantine Coast in Berbice. My grandfather and his family actually developed this entire village. And this is a record, including several additional records that I have, how they were paying these people to actually weed the bushes and so forth to create these things. If you go to that village today, you will say, wow, this is a marvel of engineering. But these people did everything with their own hands, with cutlass and tools that they also created. Look, 1905, he was paying these people to cut the bushes and so forth 32 cents per day. And I did a little bit of searching. Was this really accurate? In 1905 in British Guiana, there was a big strike led by Critchlow. And he was advocating in Georgetown that we need more wages. They need way higher wages. And the guys who were working on the ships, because of that advocacy, they got an increase to 80 cents per day. The laborers, and you can see the names there, all of them for Eastern UP, Balia, Bihar, all those places, they were getting 32 cents per day, right? But just from that, what they have created in the country, and you can see the legacy here today, out of nothing, something was created, almost. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about this. This was my first introduction to science. So my grandfather, you know, it's kind of interesting, lucky guy, or unlucky if you wish. My father had died, I was just a year old. And I grew up with my grandparents. So I was integrated there. I thought that my grandfather really was my father. And I had a very close relationship with him. He had a 5-acre farm. This is on the bank of the Quarantine River. The Atlantic Ocean was facing the other side there. So it was all salted water. And he used to plant vegetables and all this type of thing. And what this guy did was really amazing. He dug a hole, deep hole, and this is not the exact thing, but this is a representation. He casted it, put drums after drums, and was able to extract water. Not salted water, but fresh water to water the plants. And it was something that I could never forget, because I said, wow, this is really amazing. This salt water, there was a swamp on the other side, saltwater swamp. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. Okay. Newton Prasad Bishop. His father, my understanding, he was a professor of mine. His father was a very, very poor guy, and I'm not sure whether Bishop himself ever went to high school in Guyana. He probably have taken exams on his own, like other people, including our friend Ramesh Gampat, who never went to high school as well. And he's an outstanding economist. But anyway, his father was selling cane juice. He ended up in the UK, and he became head of the Department of Cytogenetics at the Marie Curie Research Foundation. This was a husband and wife team that won the Nobel Prize. If you know a little bit about the history of Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry. And so this is named after them. Newton Prasad Bishop was really a pioneer in cytogenetics, and cytogenetics has to do with the chromosomes. And look at the chromosomes, you see the structure of the chromosomes, the chromatin and so forth in there, and you can make diagnosis. So he was a real pioneer in that thing. Between 1964 and 1981, Bishop published 56 peer-reviewed journals. Now this, I wanted to emphasize again, we need to be thinking like this. Quite often, we are the judge, the jury, and the executioner of our own work. Science do not work like that, okay? Peer review process, meaning he was able to publish all of these things because his peers reviewed this, and the man published in top-notch journal. These journals are still some of the most highly rated, highly cited journals today. most importantly, he had a doctoral student by the name of Keith Campbell. Are you familiar with Molly the sheep? Molly the sheep was the first animal that was clubbed. This was Bisham's student. Became famous internationally around the world. And this technique emerged from his lab, and when the sheep was cloned, at the time in the scientific literature, there was a lot of debate. This could not be done because they used what we call human somatic cell. If people here understand these terms, you will know. It was not supposed to be done, but they were able to do it. So really interesting stuff. Bishop suffered from heart disease. He had to leave the UK. He returned to Guyana, where I was studying, and I was very fortunate to meet him. And immediately, I saw a difference with Professor Bishop. We had a very good rapport. I went to his home a few times. I was a prominent member in the University Hindu Society, and he would come there and sit quietly and listen without saying a word. Then one morning, we went to school, and he didn't show up. The message came that he had a heart attack and he died. It's a great soul. He made tremendous advancement to human civilization. People like myself, today, we are still citing his work. It's really amazing. Then this other guy, Prem Suk Punai. Prem Suk Punai is really a distinguished son of Guyana. He was born at number 56 village. This is a neighboring village. I know a lot of his family members, neighboring village to where I grew up. He was a distinguished agronomist. He worked for the British Commonwealth for over 25 years. Many of the rice varieties in Guyana was developed by Prem Suk Punai. The story is, one of his brother, another distinguished guy, was a doctor, and when they had family gathering, they would, talk among themselves, and apparently there was a chip on this guy's shoulder that I'm a physician and you're just an agronomist. And Prem Suk decided that, you know what, I have to teach this guy a lesson, so he dropped everything and he completed his MD degree. And he never practiced medicine, although he was qualified as a physician. He made tremendous impact. Again, he wrote a book about the origins of language. He was a great linguist. He had good working knowledge of Sanskrit. I know he could speak Hindi because he talked to people who know him before. Some of his family members could still, the Punai family. And he was head of the Guyana Arya Samaj. Okay, I'm just going to say quickly here that when we're thinking about the diaspora, we need to be thinking data. And when we think data, there's a couple of things we need to be thinking about. One is the tool that we are using to collect this data. Is this tool accurate and valid? The data that you're collecting, is it reproducible? The data that you're collecting from your population, is the population size adequate? Do you have enough power to make the deductive reasoning that you're making? And I will go so far as to say that we are not thinking like that. And we need to start thinking like that because we have the expertise. We can start somewhere. Ravi Devji is here. I want to give him credit because in the aftermath of the 1998 riots, January 12, 1998, the Guyanese Indian Foundation Trust was created. He and people like Swami Achananda did a marvelous job at documenting the atrocities that were committed against Indians. Myself and Dr. Ramesh Gampat, we went through the newspaper because we wanted to show data, because I know this will have an impact on the international community, what was happening. Went through painstakingly the newspapers, collected the data, we did a cross-sectional study, and we published it. So data is going to be very important, but most importantly, the quality of this data is going to be important. To advance the cause, conferences like this is going to be very important, but not simple speaking. There has to be some follow-up. There needs to be some position papers, maybe some peer-reviewed papers. When you think about us as a people, 1838, the first set of people came. We don't have any journal that I'm aware of that we can say, this is our journal. And we have our own reviewers. We don't have anything like that. So I call upon my colleagues, let us put our heads together and try to create these things and liaise with the international community as well. A comment was made earlier about what are we doing in terms of advancing the next generation. The next generation, like Hindu Yuva, is going to be very important. Many of you here are already familiar and sang about the great work of Saraswati Vidyaniketan in Guyana, which is a Hindu high school. So I wanted to give a credit here to Swami Akshananda for making this institution one of the top high schools in the country and creating a next generation of people. I believe there's a lot of grounding and what we can say, Indianness is taking place there. Okay. One thing that we need to put into context as well, that when the Indian people came from India, they were living in a mono-ethnic society. When they went to British Guyana as an example, Trinidad, they found themselves in what? In a multi-ethnic society. And they were not ready for this. Because we know by definition, in multi-ethnic societies, what happened? There's competition. There's competition based on ethnicity, for resources, for representation in political power, and so forth and so on. Right? But despite all this competition, I would say that the Indian population have managed to keep at least what we call Shraddha, faith. You hear a lot of bhajan and so forth, people saying, puja is going on, but this is only by faith. Language is dead. We can speak a little bit, we can put things together, but the ability to converse and to understand, by and large, is over. And many of our glorious traditions, including music, has also withered to the sideline, and nothing has really been done to address these type of things. The other thing that is happening is there's a second, you can say a second, when the Indians came from India, this was considered the first imported batch of Indians, right? Now there's a second importation that's taking place. People are leaving Guyana, Trinidad, and they're now resettling in the US. So these also have important consequences, because in multi-ethnic societies, there's always going to be competition. And this is, we can learn from other societies, like the Italians. What has happened to their culture? Indian leaders need to be thinking about that. So there's a consequence for the imported Indians that are also coming again from other parts of the world into the United States. You know, things like marginalization and so forth. We know, we have heard, wherever the Indian has gone, they're able to do well. And this is the envy of other people. And because it is the envy of other people, like Guyana, for example, they're always subjected to violence and a whole lot of problems. And there need to be some serious thinking about that. In addition, I want to show you something that I think is going to be very important. What is happening to the Indian population? Whether we like it or not, there's a change that is going on. And unless this comes out in our discourse, we are just not going to make any major impact. So I want to show you here quickly. I know I've taken about a little bit extra time, but look here. This is the percent. I will give you the numbers of the baseline numbers in a moment. But look, I want to show you something here. Look at, this is data from 1880 to 2012. Right? Some of this data has been produced by Rameshji, Dr. Ramesh Gampat. Look at the Hindu population in 1880 was 83.5. This is percent of the total population, Indian population, I mean. By 2012, it is now 62.84. So the Hindu population is declining over the long stretch. Hindu population is declining. What is happening here? The Muslim population will remain fairly stable over that long period of time. Hindu population has decreased by over 20 percentage point. Muslim population is stable. Christian population is increasing. Okay? So, let's see something else here. Look at this. This is the actual hard numbers. This is population data again. This is from 1891 all the way from 2012. What you can see here, beginning in the 1980s, when you look at the Indian population, there's a decline of the Indian population. Look at the African population. This is Afro-Guyanese. There's a decline in the Afro-Guyanese population. Look at the mixed race. What is happening in the mixed race?
Drastic increase.
Drastic increase in the mixed race. Most of that population is coming from somewhere, and you can see where it is coming from. ladies and gentlemen, this has a lot of impact for the future of the Indians in the Caribbean countries, if they're going to remain as Indians. In many other former British colonies, like Jamaica, you go and spend your vacation in Jamaica, you get goat curry. Goat curry. But you go in and you ask, where are the Indians in Jamaica? The Indians are gone, the curry has remained. Understand? So there's very serious consequence to this type of thing. Sometimes, when we talk, we don't think, we talk from our heart. I just want to say that we need to be thinking a bit more carefully and not make mistakes that will have serious consequences for the, I mean, a lot has passed already. You cannot reverse many of these things. So there's going to be tremendous changes in the future, right? So some observation, you've seen it there. I just want to finish now by saying that this is all Ochana. This is my own observations. The take-home point is our population is changing. There's drastic changes in the Indian population in Guyana, and we need to be careful about that. The mixed group is increasing. And what we know, what we learned from the US, if you're mixed in the US, how are you categorized?
Blacks.
You're blacks. And I can tell you, I am dealing with scholars all over the world. Every mixed person aligned themselves with blacks. And that is a cultural identity as well. So in Guyana and in Trinidad, there's a lot of problems coming down the pike. The leaders don't understand this. When you talk to many of our political leaders, it's like you're talking to someone in outer space. They don't understand these things. So I don't want to take more of your time, and I would like to say thank you very, very much indeed. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Mahabirji, for that wonderful demonstration of the scientific mindset that we have and need to have as Caribbean. So the next speaker is Dr. Vishnu Visramji. He's a political analyst and writer, and his talk will be praising India and Indian-Caribbean relations.
Thank you very much. Well, that has been done. You have heard of some of the challenges and issues and problems pointed out by the preceding speakers in Caribbean societies. And very often, wherever I travel, I heard statements that India is not doing anything for us meaning the Indo-Caribbean people. And so I thought it is important for us to reflect on that statement. Has India really been doing much for us? And can India do more or less? And so it is important for us to recognize that India has been doing a lot for the Indo-Caribbean people, going way back in 1838 since we first came. We must not forget that the Indian politicians, I want to say Indian government, but it wasn't the Indian government at the time, that sent several commissions to study the indentured system, to look at the abuses of the indentured system, and help to bring about some changes and transformations over that 80-year period, from 1838 to 1917, up to 1920 when it officially ended. And there has been ongoing engagement as well with the Indo-Caribbean societies. India, before Trinidad and Guyana and Suriname became independent countries, India was allowed to establish a posting in each one of them. And so there was a representative that looked after the interests of the Indo-Caribbean population at the time. And over the years, India provided a large number of scholarships preceding independence and post-independence. It is quite true that many of the scholarships did not go to Indo-Caribbean people because it was given to the governments of the Caribbean, which in turn distributed scholarships to their own supporters, which is only natural, as I had written some time ago. If I'm in government, if you elect me in government, I am there to represent the interests of the people who elect me, not the people who are on the other side. They have their representatives, and I think that is where the Indian leaders failed their supporters by not advocating and representing the interests of their supporters. So, over the years, in New York, Ravi Dev can vouch, in the early 1980s, we met with nationals from India, Indian politicians, L.K. Advani, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, even before he became Prime Minister. And even Morarji Desai, at one time we met. And when we pointed out the issues and problems that we faced in the Caribbean, very often they would tell us, but you know, your leaders didn't tell us about those problems. In fact, they told us to stay back, because if they get involved in the problems, it will make it worse for the Indian population in the Caribbean. And in fact, just a few months ago, I met one of the leaders in Guyana who told me the exact same thing, that please don't bring up these issues about the Wisma massacre and other massacres, because if you do, it will make it more difficult for the Indian population. So here we have a situation where we have some people criticizing the government of India for not doing enough for the issues and problems and challenges facing the Indo-Caribbean communities, and on the other hand, the representatives, the elected representatives of the Indian population, are saying, please don't get involved. So, the current Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi ji, when he was installed in May of 2014, made it very clear that he wants to get involved and engage the Indian communities around the world, and he has traveled extensively to virtually every Indian diaspora society except in the Caribbean. And when we approached leaders in the Caribbean to invite Prime Minister Modi to come, no, we cannot invite him. It will make it more difficult for us to get re-election. And so every time you try to find a solution to a problem, there's an obstacle. So you can't have it both ways, of saying India is not engaging, and at the same time you're saying we don't want them to come either. So it's my position that India should, in fact, get engaged, because we're facing a lot of problems. And I've had a discussion yesterday with a group of activists from Guyana, and they're very, very concerned that there's going to be very serious violence against the Indian community in Guyana. We see it in the making over the last couple of years. And unless steps are now being taken to address these issues, you're going to hit the news very, very soon of serious atrocities being committed on the Indian population. And the Indo-Caribbean population have been making significant contributions to India as well, because many of us do go to India very often. I mean, I go regularly to India. Every couple of months I'm there, engaging my roots communities and trying to help in whatever way I can with my ancestral relatives. I know others who are doing the same thing. A friend of mine, Ramesh Kalacharan, unfortunately he's become very ill, runs a travel agency and has been running diaspora tours to India for the last 30 years. And so Indo-Caribbean people have been going to India and are contributing in various ways in their ancestral villages. Some of them are still trying to trace their roots. And when they do, I'm sure they'll make contributions. I know of quite a number of Trinidadians who have established foundations in Trinidad, in UP, and in Bihar. And to talk more about some of these things that we are planning for India in whatever little way we can, I'll introduce, if the speaker doesn't mind, my friend Dennis Ramdayan will talk more about a foundation that we are trying to establish in India that will address some developmental issues in the villages of UP and Bihar. Dennis. And with that, I can finish. I'm sure it's going to engage me more.
I want to say thank you to Vishnu for his support and for giving me half of his time slot to talk a little bit more about what we, the children of the diaspora, can contribute back to the motherland, to India. And I'm happy to be on this panel with such a prominent scientist and data processor. From a scientific standpoint, Dr. Mahavir, you were so right in some of your statements that if our politicians would just listen and see the science and process the scientific data, it would make such a tremendous difference in our policy making. So I have prepared a little handout. I only prepared 30 copies, but on here is our foundation's name and my contacts. It's the project we have designed, and I say designed, is a business and scientific model for poverty alleviation. And myself, I'm also a scientist. I'm an environmentalist, to be more in fact. And when I first went to India and I saw the condition of the lands, you know, that our forefathers originated, the ancestral villages, I was so shocked. I said, you know, India is a very powerful country. India has some of the best scientists in the world. You know, India now has some of the most spectacular billionaires, you know, on the planet. And why is Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, to start with, in such a terrible state? People, believe it or not, are living as if it is still the times of Jesus Christ. Living in grass huts, main mode of transportation sometimes in these villages are donkey carts, have no toilets, no clean drinking water, no medical facilities. Winter comes down from the Himalayas, they have no shoes, no clothing. What's going on? You know, I'm coming from New York City and I'm seeing this thing, having been born in Trinidad, you know, and we haven't even experienced these things. And I said we have to do something. So in 2009, we started the Vihara Foundation. The Vihara Foundation was commissioned by two recently retired United Nations ambassador, a former senior advisor to the President of the General Assembly, and former United Nations Director of Water and Sanitation for UNICEF. So my passion for sustainable development started right here in Columbia University. When I first attended the State of the Planet conference in 2006, I was already working on development issues for the Caribbean. I was working on a poverty alleviation model for Haiti. And I said, no, I ended up quitting my job in New York and I took a contract in India for 3 years. I set up in Calcutta. And we proceeded, we went to the fields in Balia. And we started to collect data. And we found astounding and disturbing data facts that said, look, if we don't fix this problem, there's going to be no more ancestral lands. This place will soon, in the next generation, probably become barren because soil fertility is diminishing, water sustainability is diminishing, biodiversity is diminishing, and the farmers themselves are diminishing because when you can't even feed yourself or your family, they pack up and they move and live in the slums in the cities. So what we are doing, you know, I have a presentation here. If anybody's interested in a presentation, I can email it to you. This was a presentation we actually prepared for the government of India. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of talk about solving poverty, but yeah, it's all political talk. I hate to say it, I hope there's no politicians in here. It's all political talk. So we got to take things in our own hands. Okay, so this is why the Indian Diaspora Council, USA, and globally, with the help of Dr. Vishnu Visram, we're designing new strategies on how to reach the funding, because the model is complete. The model, I some of the best scientists in the world who have come together to do landscape restoration, water sustainability, understanding climate change impact on northern India, you know, all these things. The model is, it's a business model too, because we're trying to crack this crazy thing called 19th century economics, which is, you know, I don't know who wrote 19th century economics, but it's still being taught in all these schools. And it's the root cause of all the problems that is contributing to poverty. So if we have to give back to India, we want to do it in a big way. We want to do it in a scalable way. I'm not just going into the village to build a school or to put a water pump. No, this model is dynamic. This model is a cookie cutter model. It's going to be 500 square kilometers in size, with an economic turnover of about $2.4 billion US annually. That's how much production we are going to try and achieve. And we are going to change the value chain. So farmers are no longer small and marginal producers. They are going to be a farmers cooperative with good business strategies. We are going to estimate what the value is, over the total life cycle value of what the system is. We're going to create financing policy to borrow against the tail end so we can capitalize the front end. And we are going to put the best strategies. I'll just show you quickly what it looks like. We're going to put the best techniques, technologies, business strategies. This is what it looks like right now. Random distribution of small farming in North India and all over India. This is actually a satellite image that collected this data. The government is trying to forecast how much food is India producing. You know, these poor farmers producing these foods. By using color imaging, they're able to actually do that. But what we're trying to do is actually change that. We're trying to change it from random distribution of small farming into structured farming. So we can know how much water we're taking out, how much water we're putting back, what we need to grow in order to meet India and the Indian diaspora food security, global food security, how to best manage biodiversity. In a sense, we want to transform the landscape into something structured. Okay, and the good thing about this model, this thing has taught me so much lessons that I'm now an agriculture development advisor to CARICOM via the the Institute of Caribbean Studies. We are helping with the restoration of the Caribbean after the hurricanes. We are working with some of the governments to help bring some of these experts and strategies to build back food security and build back resilience into the Caribbean. And disaster management is also one of our areas we're innovating. So these are things that are important if we have to survive and strengthen the next generation. So, you know, there's a ton of questions I can answer about this, and we invite people, you know, I mean, I'm just here to inform you. If you have an interest in this book, for your community or for your country, you know, feel free to talk to me. But one of the main things we're working on right now is writing the letter. Somebody spoke about remittances. You know, there's remittances that is locked up in some bank in the colonial system somewhere in London. Well, we are trying to, the Indian Diaspora Council and the Vihara Foundation are collaborating now to write to the Queen of England and say, listen, British had an influence on the present day poverty of India. What can you do? How can you join us in hand and help us solve this problem? And what we're really aiming at is redirect the development funding that is in New Delhi towards the heart of the British. So we can deliver this project, we can make the impact from the diaspora community, and the world can be a better place. So thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Thank you to Mr. Ram Dalenji for inviting us. Ram Dalenji, sorry, for enlightening us about the situation in the States. So again, another round of applause for these three speakers. So now I would like to invite Dr. Yelaji Mirajkar to present the speakers with the plaques of appreciation. So Dr. Mirajkar ji, he's the General Secretary for Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh in America.
Thank you very much.
So now we will have a very brief Q&A session. So, we'll just take 3 questions and try to keep it to that one question that each person is saying.
My question is for Dennis. This is such a wonderful project. Can you probably shed a little bit of light on the issue of the suicides of farmers? I was listening to Dr. Vandana Shiva at Vassar College maybe about 2 years ago, and one of the things she was talking about is the contaminated seeds that are being used by the farmers there, that is depleting the land and causing the farmers to ultimately commit suicide. How are you handling the legal element with large GMO companies like Monsanto that are coming into media?
Yeah, the issue with Monsanto is the root of the problem. Well, if you look at the last 2 bullets here, government can consider facilitating a special purpose vehicle for establishing policies and incentives to encourage farmers to engage in community cooperative. And then this whole thing has to do with, in order to create you see the marginalized farmers, small farmers, is what's causing the suicide, because when the Monsanto controls the seed market, and they are only 1 generation seeds, when the farmers think traditionally we can harvest the seed and go plant it back, the crops grow and they grow to full height, but the pods have no grains in them. So, and then this is why they go into bankruptcy and they end up committing suicide and stuff. But we were advised for this project, we have to encourage government to play a role. Government has to set up the special purpose vehicles to encourage land pooling, because this project can't go forward without a legal policy for land pooling. And government can recapture. The big thing is a lot of billions of dollars in loans are being written off by the Indian government because of farmer suicide. And the government is seeing it as a loss. So the model is trying to show government how they can recoup that loss. If they can recoup that loss, it makes business sense. It has to make business and scientific sense, otherwise it can't go forward.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Ram Kenchikota, I'm a journalist. I work for a national news agency which is based in New Delhi. I'm the New York correspondent for that news organization. So this question is for Mr. wisdom. You say that the community and the governments in the Caribbean are sort of objecting for the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the region, although he has visited so many countries where the Indian populations are significant. So can you do something, can you or other organizations, do something to put pressure on the Caribbean government or to request again and again the Indian government, because this is the best available chance for you guys do it. And the ties with the motherland are growing very exponentially, I can say. For instance, the relationship between India and the US are very strong, and the Indian diaspora is doing a great job.
Well, you know, there is no quote-unquote an Indian-oriented government anywhere in the Caribbean anymore. The two that were there are no longer there. We are examining this, we're studying it to see if it makes sense in making a recommendation to New Delhi, where myself and Ravi have a very strong connection, to see if it makes sense at this time. And then we'll make a decision jointly and to recommend with others here that we know whether it makes sense for there to be such a state visit. But I can tell you that early this year we tried very hard to get one of the governments in the Caribbean to invite the foreign minister of India to come, and that government was very, very unwilling. We are faced with all kinds of challenges, not only in terms of safety and security, but also in getting governments to do certain things for us. But I can tell you, I was involved very, very deeply at the top, and we couldn't convince the government to extend an invitation. And an invitation came very, very late for a lower level person to come to a conference we had. So, so yes, we'll discuss this and see if it makes sense. And whether, but I would have loved to have Prime Minister Modi to come to the Caribbean. In fact, I thought he was going to come to Venezuela, was it early this year or last year, and then hop over. But he decided not to go to Venezuela, so which might have been a wise thing, not going anyway.
Thank you. One more round of applause for all of our speakers. I think in the interest of time, so we can move forward, we'll have to cut the Q&A here. However, we're going to take a 15-minute break, so 3:45 we can come back. There's food in the back, also bathroom, restroom facilities around the corner. And this is the time if we have any questions.